the moment that I realized I was tripping on LSD for the first time is I sat in this love seat, and it felt like I'd never hit any type of support.
Yeah.
So I just kept going. I just started bringing my legs up, and I was going, huh. And
am I floating?
And I was just going like this, like feeling myself go down. And Jeff goes, still not feeling anything? And I was like, nah, man, I'm good.
Welcome to the Trip Sitting Podcast, where we explore what it means to be human. I am your host, Cam Leeds. On this episode, we have AJ Finney, who is a fucking hilarious comedian that I had the pleasure of meeting last November when he was emceeing at the Denver Psilocybin Cup, hosted by the Psychedelic Club of Denver. And this episode ended up going a little bit longer than I usually try to make them, just because we were just honestly having such a good time recording that I completely lost track of time. But it was a lot of fun. So this is definitely one you are not going to want to miss, and I appreciate you coming. This episode is sponsored by Mushmore. Mushmore unlocks its members' full potential through the power of microdosing, and they have an amazing community of people that will help you get started and support you along your journey. Be sure to join their Telegram channel to learn how to access their products and get access to the incredible community. Make sure you're following the Trip Sitting Podcast on whatever platform you're listening to this on, and give it a rating if you feel called to do so. But other than that, that's all I got for you. Here's AJ.
And then I got the watch, and dude, now I'm in the Kool-Aid is running deep through my veins.
Is it, dude? I was so late to even switching to getting an iPhone. I've now only had an iPhone for 2 years.
Yeah? How do you?
Yeah.
Are you?
I mean, I fucking hate to say that I like it. I hate it so much because I hate everything Apple stands for. I really do. Of just making expensive products way more expensive than they need to be, and somehow creating like this cult where people will attack you if you're not using the same shit that they do. And the only thing that pissed me off about that, because like I get it now, like now I see a green text and I'm immediately kind of like but I at least went through the pain of having the Android for 8 years beforehand, whereas most of the people that are getting mad at people for having Androids, they never even experienced it.
Right.
Like they don't know what they're talking about necessarily. I can at least be like, there were some positives to doing it the other way.
I had some fun when I had Android phones for sure. But I will say this, I had an Apple that was my first iPhone, and I bought the lowest end memory I could. Here's what they don't tell you. Never do that. Yeah. Because Apple is so ingrained. They'll give you warnings like, hey, you have too much data. You're running out of memory. And if you ignore that long enough, it'll just start cannibalizing stuff to save itself.
Oh, shit.
So it started deleting like text messages that I had. And I'm the worst at saving people's phone numbers. Like I'll have someone text me their phone number, and then I'll go, I'll do that later.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah,
all the time.
And then so I had some people,
and I go back, and it's sometimes it's fun to look through and see, well, what's the context that I can figure out who this is.
Yeah, the mystery of going, ooh. Yeah, I had some. I got really mad because I had some text messages that were really important with people whose names I should have saved. Just to show that I had their phone number.
Yeah.
And then,
just to be able to brag
Apple
to
was
people.
like, you done.
No. I pay for fucking 2 terabytes of memory now on iCloud, just because I'm like, it's not worth it for me even to like think that something could get lost.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the other thing, like I feel like external hard drives are a good way to go. And I'm not the most technologically advanced. I fought, God, this is so stupid to say. I fought digital music for the longest time. I was like, this is not going to take.
So I didn't fight digital. I was always for digital music, but my first car did not have an aux cord. And so I remember burning CDs all the time. I remember going to LimeWire or Napster or whatever Napster was at that point.
Yeah.
And then downloading it and then putting it into iTunes, which was the thing. Like iTunes wasn't as sophisticated back then.
Right.
Where you couldn't just upload your own shit to it. So then putting it onto iTunes and then burning my own CDs.
Dude, yeah. Once you had the burn CD, did you have the CD player that was portable that had the flip top?
Oh, I did. I used to carry one of those in elementary school. I remember.
God. Man. That shows my age. I had a Walkman.
Okay, yeah. So it was called a Walkman still. It was
it still called a Walkman?
Yeah, it was still called a Walkman.
Wow.
Just with CDs instead of tapes.
Wow. Man. Gosh. I rode the bus, and I can remember just basically teleporting myself into my own world with my headphones and the tape deck. And man, it was the worst when the battery started to go down. Because it was just like, whoa, and I go, now I'm going to have to engage with people.
That was before anything was rechargeable, too.
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
How long have you lived in Denver now? Since 2016?
2016, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved out here in 2016 with
From
Zach.
Kansas? Or where were you at that point?
At that time, before I moved out here, I was in Springfield, Missouri.
Okay.
We were living with Marciana, my wife, who you met, who on stage, if people have seen the act, I call my roommate.
I was going to make that joke when I walked in, and I was like, I bet they get that way too often.
It's so funny because I will, off stage, I'll be like, well, my wife, and then people will correct me now and go, you mean your roommate? Or if she's around, people will go, so you're the roommate, Tina? And her name's not even Tina. That's another one of the jokes that gets brought up. She's a great sport, but we were in Springfield living at her parents' place.
Okay.
They have 5 acres, and yeah, it was nice.
Okay. This is just a really random kind of left field thing, but something that you've talked about on stage, I've seen in your comedy, and then also on the podcast, is the fact that like you have anxiety, correct?
Yeah, it's I do, and I'm going to say this, it's been a lot more manageable over the last couple of years, surprisingly.
Why stand-up comedy for? Because when I first hear somebody that has anxiety, I don't picture them as a stand-up comedian.
Right. Oh, man. It's funny because there have been people, when I would talk about my anxiety at the peak levels, I would get off stage and there would be people that would just go, yeah, you're just lying. And I was like, that's not fair.
I don't know what to say to that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. So it's interesting. Socially, I get anxious when I don't. It's almost like I don't know how to react. I feel like it might be a control factor. So when I'm on stage, the issue is for the most part, I'm in control of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And if the audience is laughing, then there's a calmness inside of me. When it's not going well, man, it is not so great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. Someone asked me about comedy today, and I think some people just have something inside of them that they're driven to do, regardless of how uncomfortable it might be at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, performing or trying to entertain people. That has always been there. I mean, I can remember... Was
stand-up comedy the first outlet that you tried, or did you try a few other things before you got to this?
So I was I was a kind of a theater kid in high school, and with no real intention of doing it. Like I was, I don't know if you'd call me the class clown, but I was, because of the energy and the anxiety, like I was kind of a handful at times. Some of those teachers, I feel bad for what I put them through.
I was always the incredibly well-behaved student.
Were you?
Well-behaved. I never got into any trouble when I was growing up.
Are you being serious?
I am. I'm being dead serious. I literally, I was always I had straight A's.
Yeah.
I never like fucked around with shit at the house. I never broke anything. It wasn't until, I mean, probably once I was like 16, 17, probably actually more like 17, 18 actually, like that. When my parents would leave and stuff, I'd be like, okay, let me try to see if I can find some liquor somewhere, and you know,
find a way to get into trouble.
Yeah, do that. I think I only actually took from my parents' liquor cabinet one time, and they never noticed.
Yeah, I don't know. So I grew up in a Midwestern family. My parents were very young when I was born, and so there are periods when I look back on my history where I was like the youngest person at the party.
Okay,
and I don't think this is bad. Some people might find this to be weird, and I don't even think it would be abusive, but it's almost like you're doing parlor tricks at some point, you know? And I felt that way. I was always trying to cut up with my dad's friends, and I would see my dad holding court a lot, and it's traditionally an Irish thing at the bar, too. So, and I was never like, it was funny because I would hear them telling old stories of like bar fights and stuff like that. And then they get to me and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I guess I could try to make something up. And there were a couple of times I'd try and I'd be like, oh, I was just really pounding this guy. And they're like, you don't have to lie. Like it didn't.
AJ, we know.
Yeah, we know you didn't do that. Just stick to what you're good at. I'm like, is it lying? They're like, we don't think lying's your strong suit.
Now, how much of stand-up comedy though is you know, stretching the truth a little bit?
Oh, there's a good amount. Yeah. In the sense of everything I talk about comes from truth. Yeah. And then it's a matter of making that palatable, and then making that palatable also entertaining, right? So I guess sometimes a comedy bit is a lot like a piece of art. It's just ever forming. And I don't think that the bit for the most part is ever done. You just abandon it. You're like, okay, that's maybe as good as it's going to be for now and moving on. But yeah, I think most of it, I mean, probably 75% until you start getting into this part of the story is too long before I need a punchline.
Yeah.
You know? But I will say in the last couple of years, I feel like I'm not much different off stage than I am on stage. And that has made me feel very comfortable.
Do you think, I was going to say, do you think that's helped with the anxiety lately? Because you were saying that over the last few years now, it's been more manageable.
You know, I don't know why I pay for a therapist. I could just have you come over. And do this.
I get that more often than I should.
Right? You're a great listener. You know, that might have something to do with it. The more I think about it, the more, because at the beginning of my career doing stand-up, I was really kind of doing my best impression of what I thought comedy was, or stand-up. And I think anyone who tells you they just stepped into it and was them, that's the biggest lie you'll ever hear.
What's the first show that you can remember that just went fucking terrible?
Oh, buddy. Okay. God, the first... Well, so it's weird. I mean, as far as terrible... My first time on stage was not ideal. And this is the delusion that a lot of young comics will have. It's funny. You can bomb and not even know it due to adrenaline and delusion. Okay. And you need both of those to keep going.
To not just stop and freeze.
Right. And my first ever time going up on stage was I was 40 of 40 comics. I was 25 years old. Okay. And I'd had just a terrible breakup. And so I was just kind of lost in what I represented and realized I'd been living my life for other people for too long. And honestly, part of what I went into stand-up for was like, this is something that I'll get a hold of, and I'm doing it for me, and no one will ever take it away from me. And to some aspect, that's true. I mean, no matter what happens in my life, I can always find a bar to do stand-up.
Yeah.
But so I was 40 of 40 comics in Kansas City, and it was an audition for the William Morris Agency. And I had prepped 3 minutes. Nobody knew who I was. and the show had gone 2.5, close to 3 hours. And if you know anything about comedy now,
It's a long time.
it's about 90 minutes. 2 hours is the max. People are way drunk. And by the time I get up there, there's a woman in the front row has passed out. And her head's just down. But no one is concerned because I'm the last person, my 3 minutes and they're done.
You were the last person out of 40?
Person out of 40.
Okay.
And look, the way that the industry works too, now that I know this, the only people that are there to be seen are somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I went up. I cannot remember the material.
Mm-hmm.
It was some sort of bizarre riff that I was working on. That was an odd, just kind of a loony rant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my head, I was like, "This is prolific." No one's listening, and I'm like less than 90 seconds into it, and the woman, head down, just starts doing this, and I was like, "What is happening?" And then she just threw up, but never picked her head up, and so she just went, and it just went everywhere, and I went, and the MC just came up, grabbed the mic, and was like, "That's the show." And this is the most embarrassing part of that. I waited in the hallway to talk to the club owner. Like nobody knew who I was, and I'm just waiting. And at the end, one of the Glazers came out, and they're like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And they're like, "Who are you?" And I was like,
Like,
"I'm AJ. Don't you want to talk to me?" And they're like,
"What are you doing here?"
"Yeah." I was like, "I'm AJ," and he goes, "So?" And I was like, "Did you watch me?" And he goes, "No one watched you." Right? That's it. It's new talent night is on Monday. Like, get out of here. And but I fell in love with that aspect, and I think it was because I never knew anything about an open mic or anything. And I think now with the internet, people are so it's so easy for them to understand how to get into this business.
Yeah.
And for me, I grew up in a small town in Kansas, Leavenworth, Kansas, not too far from Kansas City. And I mean, you had to know somebody who knew somebody that was like, this is what you do. Otherwise, you just go to a show. And if you've never been to an open mic, you're just like, oh, somebody picks these people, curates it, and then that's how it happens.
I have no idea how that process happens,
right?
But it happens.
Right. So, and you grew up in California, right?
So I grew up in California, and then
what part were you near? Like the industry? Were you in LA?
So like I was in LA County. I was about as far away that I could have been while still being considered LA. Okay. So I was in Agora Hills, if you've ever heard of that.
No.
It's like if you go past the valley, so like from LA through the San Fernando Valley, you get to the end of the San Fernando Valley, which is like Woodland Hills, Calabasas.
Okay.
Then there's Agora Hills, and then LA County ends.
Okay. So you're not deep enough in the city to get all the perks, but you're close enough to still have to pay the taxes.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's funny saying that, like, you know, I grew up near LA, but I know nothing about the actual city of LA for the most part. Like, someone's like, oh, like I'm going to be in Chino Hills. I'm like, yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, like, I don't know where the fuck that is, but like
every time I'm out there, I learn something new. Like, I have a friend who lives in Pine Mountain Club, which is near Fraser Park. It's like 90 minutes from the city. And when he was like, I live in Pine Mountain Club. And I was like, yeah, but where do you live? This club is in what city?
Like, what does that mean?
And it's beautiful up there. It looks like an old like state park that they were like, we could turn this into a place to live.
Yeah. So I pretty much moved out of California the second I could. I went to college in Ohio.
Oh wow, what part?
I went to Ohio State. So
Columbus is a cool place.
Columbus is a cool city. It's just every person I'd meet is, why the fuck are you here?
Yeah. What'd you go to school for?
I originally went to school to try to be an engineer. After one semester, I switched to a different engineer, and then after that semester, I switched to business. because that was the much easier path.
Right.
And then I didn't do a single thing with that business degree after I graduated that I actually needed that degree for.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I technically got a logistics degree, which is like very niche. You know, working in either warehouses or you're working with trucks.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving shit.
That's it.
And I had one internship where I was in charge of basically like finding trucks that would pick up these loads that would be over here and they would need to be moved over here. And I'd literally be calling dispatchers being like, here's how much money I can give you, and like negotiating and doing that. And I fucking hated it.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, no, this ain't for me. And then once I found out too how much like the pay was, it was like, this isn't worth it. Like, what? Also, I don't need a degree for this. Why the hell did I just go to school for any of this?
Yeah.
And then I started working in tech sales.
Okay. Yeah, I worked at UPS for a while, and that's where I learned the word logistics.
Okay.
And
they're big on that there.
Yep. And then I worked at Amazon for a minute, and that's where I learned procurement.
Okay, nice.
So
I remember that there was something we learned about in one of our classes about UPS, was that at some point they started doing this thing where they would only have their trucks make right turns.
Oh, wow. Was this for accident?
No, purposely, rather than because they would spend less time waiting at lights. If they could make their entire route only making right turns, I mean, they wouldn't have to sit idle at a light waiting for a left.
Wow.
I don't know if they still do that, but I remember that I remember learning, like, that was just like these one weird fun fact.
Yeah. It's jacked up, but also brilliant with, I mean, strategy wise. Mm-hmm. So, wow.
And then, yeah, pretty much. So I moved to Chicago after that for a couple years, and then I've been here for a year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how'd you like Chicago?
I like Chicago a lot. Chicago is a great city. I used to go to Laugh Factory. That was one of the first places that I went.
Really?
When I went to, like, not performing, obviously. Yeah.
But it's interesting you say obviously. I'm like, you know how to hold the mic. Like, that's the first stage.
But yeah, that was like, you know, and it was also too still during COVID. That was one of the few things that started opening up in like a limited capacity that you could go out and do.
I didn't think about that. Like, Chicago during COVID had to be eerie.
Dude, I've got a funny story. So I went to visit my friend in Chicago. This was in probably like September 2020.
Okay.
So this is like the height of COVID. Also too, this is during the George Floyd riots. And there was a lot going on in Chicago, being the city that it is.
Yeah. And close to, like, you're not that far from like Minneapolis and St. Paul, where all that stuff went down.
No. And so I remember visiting him in Chicago, and, you know, again, not much is open. There's not much to do. So obviously we decided that we were going to take in ate the mushrooms in his apartment and just see where the night took us.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and, you know, an hour goes by, like, we're not feeling much. 2 hours go by, we're not feeling anything.
Really?
And we're like, fuck, we might have just gotten like some duds or something. Like, there's must have not been any psilocybin in these ones. And so we're like, hey, fuck it, let's, you know, maybe smoke some weed and see if that helps kick it in. Like, wait another half hour, like, nothing. Literally 2.5 to 3 hours go by. We don't feel a single thing.
Really?
So we're like, all right, whatever. Let's go out and maybe just like walk to the river, walk around. And then we get outside his apartment. We get these like divvy bikes, which are the ones that you can just like rent.
Okay.
And just like go bike down to the river. And then, like, we get off right at the river, and both of us, we just look at each other at the same time and give each other this look like, oh shit,
we shouldn't be outside.
We started looking around, and everything looked real different. And that's when, like, all we noticed was like, oh my God, look at all these fucking SWAT cops over there.
Whoa.
And like just these really weird vibes down here at the river. And we're both like, we didn't say anything. We're like, we need to get the fuck back. And so that walk back to his apartment as these shrooms are finally kicking in, which we didn't think was going to happen. And like, as we're looking around, and like, you know, we could see there's like broken glass and stuff just from, you know, some of the, protests that were going on. And then, but it just, we finally got back to his apartment and like get into his elevator, and we both just hit the ground laughing so hard, being like, thank God we made it out of that. That was terrible.
The situations you find yourself in when you're tripping sometimes are the most bizarre. You're like, why did we have to make this harder than it is?
There is no reason for any of this. Like we really overcomplicated the shit out of that.
That is insane. That was wild, because during the story I was like, oh, the mushrooms are kicking in. Yeah, this is great. And then you're like, oh no, you're in the middle of some real shit.
Yeah. And again, but the funny thing is, we noticed none of that as we were going to the river and the mushrooms were not kicking in. It was only once the mushrooms kicked in that we start to see all of the things that are happening. And that's what psychedelics do, is you notice things that you normally just don't notice at all. Because I have no reason to notice those things.
Yeah, that's true.
When did you first start experimenting with LSD?
So I was like 16 years old. That's when I started. It was pretty rampant because of where I grew up. If you're familiar with all of it's outside of Lawrence a little bit. There's a giant missile silo that was underground, and there's a big lab there. So anyway, it was I was just like, there was no lack of it. But when I was 16 years old, that's when I first started, and the first time I'd ever taken LSD, I had taken it was like a half or a quarter hit, and I got nothing. So when you're a kid, you're so dumb. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm like immune to it.
My body is a fucking temple.
Come on, Lear, you can't get to me. So, and I think I was 16. It might have been 15, 16 around that time that I tried it, and nothing happened. And so I was like, okay. And I had some interesting experiences smoking pot where I'd had some like hallucinations. Which still to this day, pot and I don't necessarily get along. But I think a lot of it comes down to I'm not willing to put in the hours of training. So
that was my project right when COVID started. Was pot and me never got along, and then COVID hit, and I was like, I'm gonna make it work.
Well, because if you're willing to put in the time, then it starts to work for you. My thing is like I'd try it. I'm like, I don't know how people manage. And then so I wouldn't do it for 6 months. And then a friend of mine finally admitted, he goes, you're doing it wrong. He goes, you're having a massive dose, and then you're taking a tolerance break, and then you're blowing your mind again. He goes, you just got to do it for a week. And I was like, I don't know if I got that time.
I like to tell people, and still to this day, my tolerance is incredibly low. Like I'm not like a daily smoker, but like I microdose weed. I'll take
edibles.
No, like honestly, no. If I'm taking edible, my dose is 2 milligrams.
Okay,
like it's as low as you can possibly get.
Gotcha.
While still maybe being considered a dose.
So, are you doing like one hit of flower? Or are you doing?
I'll take one hit of flower and be like, that's all I need to usually get me to where I want to be.
See, and I had found at one point when I was trying to get along with this plant that if I did one and set it down, it would come on, it would get a little intense, but then I'd be fine. And for some reason, once I got past that threshold, then I could do it again throughout the day.
Got to warm up to it.
Yeah, it really is. You got to stretch.
You got to let her in.
Yeah. You just can't kick the door in. They call the cops. So, so I'd been having, I'd been smoking pot, and I think I've told this story before, but I had, I think the week before I actually tripped for the first time, I had done like a bong rip that was attached to a gas mask. This is the 90s.
Nice, nice.
I mean, it was just, someone had 9-inch nails on. It was a big... It was like everything was like
that's
ready for wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just, as soon as it came on, I started to panic, and then I panicked, and then I was like fighting with the guys, trying to figure out why I was having a panic attack. They were trying to get the mask off me, but I was just fighting that. So all I'm doing is bringing in more of the devil's smoke that's causing the problem. So that was about a week before
And that was the start of AJ's anxiety.
Right. It very well could have been.
Trying to get this gas mask off while he's just inhaling weed.
Yeah. And so when a friend of mine had gone to Oklahoma City, that's where he used to live, and he had you'll beep some stuff out.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Because I don't know where this lands, but I want you to know. So he had gone down to get he knew a friend who could get LSD from the drummer of the Flaming Lips at the time. And that's the part I'm not sure. But
is this to protect the drummer of the Flaming Lips that I would want to?
No, I don't know.
that I should potentially bleep this out for?
I don't know. Maybe you don't have to beep it out. Now I'm getting anxious. So he brought this back, and I'll never forget it because it was, I think this was Hearts and Locks. Each little hit, like there was one heart, and then there was a lock. Or Hearts and Lock. I can't remember. Maybe there was a lock and a key.
The acid that I hear about from back in like the 80s and 90s seems so much more creative than the acid that I find now, and the acid that I found in college. Because like, you're like, now it's just like gel tabs with like little gold flakes in them. Like probably 80% of the shit that I find, and I went through a phase where acid was the first thing that got me into psychedelics.
Okay.
Not until I was in college, though. So I had never tried. I was like, I was straight edge. Like,
yeah.
I drank a little in high school, and that was it. Tried weed a little in college, didn't like it. Tried cocaine, loved it. And
I never did cocaine because I was afraid I was going to like it too much.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I like being wound.
That was the first time I ever tried to whip it.
Oh yeah.
So it was in college, and I'm pretty sure I took a tap of LSD that day. But like I went into like my friend's place, and they were doing it, and I was meeting my other friend there. And so like I got there, and my friend that told me to come was like leaving to go grab beer like right down the street for a sec. I get in there, and then I do a whip it, and then I immediately leave. And then my friend is coming back up into the place as I'm leaving, and he's like, "You just got there. What happened?" And what I said to him apparently was, "I like that way too much. I need to go."
You're so responsible with yourself.
And then I honestly didn't touch a whip it again until probably like a couple months ago, realistically.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I went through a phase of doing nitrous for sure.
You're also big on the jam band scene.
Yeah.
So.
And it was later on in the scene where I was like, this is kind of wrecking the lot. But but when I was younger, man, God, I remember doing balloons, and it was like a challenge. Like you get a balloon and another guy get a balloon. And I don't even know if we were doing it right or if we were just hyperventilating. Like we would literally go and just...
You guys were just doing holotropic breath work.
That's right. With nitrous. That's how you... Stan Groff. Let me show you how to intensify this.
I've got something for your next book.
Yeah. It's this. But I mean, God, I lost a little bit of interest in nitrous when I watched my cousin's lips turn blue from huffing it too much, and when I saw it, I like smacked his face, and then his drool fell out, and I was like, I don't know, this isn't glamorous at all.
I don't like this anymore.
Yeah, but I will say there were times where like huffing that balloon. And when you would just go so numb, that point where you go wah 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 wah, and you're trying as hard as you can to hold the balloon, and the epic moment of tripping when it just went,
and you go, you just let it go, and you're like, damn.
And then someone in the circle would go, just go whoa 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 whoa. God, kids.
So Hearts and Locks LSD.
Hearts and Locks, yeah. Hearts and Locks. So, I had gotten, I'd asked, he asked me if I wanted to do it, and we'd kind of hung out a few times and smoked and just gone on some adventures. I mean, that was a big thing we did in the middle of Kansas too. You're like, hey, we'll go camping or kind of go outdoorsy and explore stuff, and yeah, go down to the creek and imagine what used to happen, just whatever. And so he had brought this stuff back, and I just had no real concept to the delay point. Like you're talking about when you took mushrooms, it was almost 3 hours. I took LSD for the first time, and I was like 10, 15 minutes in the waiting period. And they'd already been kind of partying. And I'll never forget going, hey man, I got nothing. And as like if someone did that to me and I had done this before, I would go, oh, you just got to wait.
Yeah. Or like, how long has it been?
Right. And no, as a good friend, he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, man, I'm not getting anything. Like, you know, I thought we were friends, and like, you guys are having fun. I gave you $5 like that. I don't know if it's still that amount of inflation, but, and he was so nice. He was like, man, I don't care. Like, he goes, you can have another one. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to do anything. Like, remember, like,
this is also you still thinking that you might be immune to LSD.
6 months at the earliest prior.
Yeah.
I had done that quarter of a hit that my friend Sean had given me, and I was like, I don't see the point in eating paper for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, this is dumb.
If I'm going to eat paper, I want something to happen.
Right. So he goes, well, I'll give you another one. And I was like, cool, man. I just don't, I'm not sure it's going to work.
I want to get my money's worth.
And he goes, well, take 2 more. And I was like, okay, thank you. And so I took the other one, and then I went and cracked a beer. And so that you understand how these had worked, also, they had double dipped all of this. So it had all had, the entire sheet had been dipped, dried, and then they went through and dropped it again.
Okay.
So potency level was supposed to be 2 times. No one told me any of this.
Yeah.
All I know is that within about 90 minutes, I was like, huh, okay. I was like, this is interesting. And it was kind of coming in those waves. And I was like, this is intense. Like, I don't know if this is going to work. And then I was like, uh-oh. This is 90 minutes after the first one. I have 2 more of these coming.
Wait a second.
I don't know. And then my hands, like, I remember them getting very sweaty.
My hands always get really clammy.
And then the stomach thing.
Yeah.
And the moment I realized, because I kept complaining, and I feel bad about that now. Like, I was such a negative Nancy, just going, oh, it just doesn't work. And I'm like, I don't get it. I'll probably go home. And then, dude, I will never forget, like, the carpet, that moment where it's like, does that first wave?
Yeah.
And I was like, huh. And Jeff's already tripping, and he just goes, what? And I was like, nothing. He goes, still not feeling anything? And I was like, no, I'm not feeling anything, Captain. And he goes, Captain? And I was like, what? And now it's like, things are getting confusing. And I was like, I don't know. I'm going to sit down. And I will never forget the moment that I realized I was tripping on LSD for the first time is I sat in this love seat, and it felt like I'd never hit any type of support.
Yeah.
So I just kept going. I just started bringing my legs up, and I was going, huh. And
am I floating?
And I was just going like this, like feeling myself go down. And Jeff goes, still not feeling anything? And I was like, nah, man, I'm good. Like, still trying to lie about it. And then he goes, your legs are in the air. And I was like, all right, I'm feeling it a little bit.
Man, maybe,
and then
maybe a tiny bit.
Dude, I've never, ever laughed so hard. Like, and there was a moment, there was a lot that happened that night. We were in a
You remember every single moment of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, vividly. Like we were in a house, like a refurbished garage that had become like a guest house. And the foundation had sank on one side. So when you walked into the house, it was just a little crooked anyway.
Yeah.
And I will never forget, like, I fell into a room. Like at one point, because
like it was that overly dramatic for you.
Yes. Well, and when you were tripping, it's like they just took it and was like, they funhoused the whole thing. Guy laughed so hard, and I was having so much fun. Nothing really made sense.
Yeah.
We watched Akira. You ever watched anime or anything?
No.
It's a really wild, like apocalyptic anime. And there's a point where there's a motorcycle, and I've tried to find this again, and I can't. Like where,
of course,
there's like a weird bing sound or something, and that hit, and it did not stop. Like it just stayed in my head. And somebody said they were hungry. I remember this woman who was supposed to be watching us.
Yeah.
She made us all steaks. Like what? Like. Think about the last thing you want to eat while you're tripping. And I think back at it now, and I'm like, what a sweet Midwestern woman had no idea.
Oh my
like
God.
The last thing you want to do is just get into flesh.
Oh my God.
But the funniest thing about it is I remember these plates being laid out, and then she gave everyone a knife and a fork. And there was a moment where everyone sadistically looked at their knife and then looked at the other person and then smiled. And then
Like-
she was like, And then she came and got all the knives. And I was like, we're all just children right now.
The intrusive thoughts.
Dude.
Like, I could.
Yeah, I will say that one negative thing that I pulled from that for sure was the beginning of like an OCD that came up, and that was my friend Tina at the time. She was tripping pretty good, and she had this little Matchbox car she was holding on to, and I was like, "What's the deal with that?" And she was like, "Well, this is what gets me back." And I was like, "Gets you back to what?" And she goes, "This is." As long as I have this,
Like it's like the Inception thing.
Yeah,
where you
this
need to
gets me
have the
back.
piece that
Yep.
that lets you know that you are still in this reality.
yeah, you bring one thing in with you, and that's the tether to get you back into the world. And look, I had some fun times with that. I had some terrifying times too because I lost my totem.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't blame her, but I'm like, why did that have to get in there?
Yeah.
You
Why
know?
you have to tell me that?
Yeah, and
So how soon after that first trip was the second trip?
within a month.
Okay.
Within a month was that. But the weird thing for me, that the trip was so wonderful, and I mean there was some weird parts. I ended up in a it was like an orange sports bra
Okay.
because that was the closest thing to a life vest that they could find. And I kept complaining that I was going to drown and that I wouldn't go out. It got really, when those other two hits came in, I got a little unconnected.
Yeah.
And everything was too liquidy. So I thought that maybe I could drown, and nobody was sane enough to deal with me.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need a life jacket. And this woman had given me an orange sports bra, and I had put it over, and I was like, this is safety.
Yeah. This will keep me safe.
Yeah. And they took me to a grocery store, which was unnecessary.
That sounds so unnecessary.
It was very unnecessary. All in hopes it was like a giant epic adventure to get orange juice.
Yeah.
Like that was
those are like the adventures of whenever, when I would trip in college with my friends and we realize we're out of something.
Oh yeah.
We're like, okay, let's like we're gearing up like we're like in Antarctica right now, having to go to like the next station that is like, 40 kilometers away.
Yeah.
Oh man.
God. The more you know what? I don't know if those were the Hearts and Locks. I can't remember what those hits were. I know I had Hoffman early on. Like each little stamp had Hoffman's face on it, which I thought was super cool. The more I think about it, I think my buddy Bob had given me this stuff that had a key and a lock in this one, and he was like, I took the lock, and later on he's like, you're gonna need that key, and I was like, what? And I mean, it blew my fucking mind. Yeah, God.
It's I don't know the science behind making LSD at all. I'm not going to pretend like I do, but it's always really funny to me when I hear people talking about different LSD, like, oh, like this LSD is better than that LSD, and I'm like, if it should theoretically all be the same molecule, so isn't it just the potency of it that's different each time?
Well, I will say this. I think if you've got clean L, that's one thing. I think at some point, and I know this started happening in the 90s for sure, it wasn't about people losing it because they went too far. I mean, no matter what you do on psychedelics, for me, I have to say that. For me, I've realized, like, if I get pretty far out, I can get pretty scared at points. I know I'm always coming back. When you forget that you're coming back, that's when it gets really rough.
Yeah.
And I had some stuff that was just dirty. Like, and I don't know if it's the person that makes it, the energy that goes into that, or what, but like back pain. I know there was always talk about strychnine. I also don't know this. If it was like psychologically put in there by media. Yeah. And then once you're in it, somebody says something and then you can't let go of it. You know?
It's so interesting the way that my mind, like, I mean, that's the entire point of psychedelics, but like the way that our minds can work and think about things on psychedelics.
Yeah.
Is, you know, taking some of the simplest tasks and the things that you normally do, and then you actually like think about them because you never ever actually think about that. Like there's almost always a point during a trip for me in which I'll get up and walk and I'll have to remind myself, right foot, left, like how do I normally, like I have to think if I were sober right now, how would I walk? What would I do?
I had a friend one time, I think it's 17, 18 years old, and we had all taken some acid. And here's the thing about that first trip too that got really weird was I should have just stayed at that house when I was coming down. But I called my girlfriend and she came and picked me up and then took me to her place, and she was mad. She was so mad that she came and picked me up.
Bad energy.
Dude, it was so weird. I was being yelled at in her kitchen. She was like, I can't, and I don't even remember the words. It was aggression. Yeah. And watching the tile just go, I was watching cities build while I was being destroyed internally. Yeah. And I was like, man, this stinks. And that caused some wild problems down the road too, with like sometimes tripping with people that I'm really close to. It can be difficult if I feel a responsibility to look out for them. Yeah. And I wish I could find a way to get past that. But I think it's because I'm an older brother. Yeah. You know, but God, that stinks.
So when did you then start getting into the jam band scene?
Oh, that's wild. So jam bands kind of came later on in life, actually. So let's see. God, how old was I? I might have been 12 or 13, something like that, when I was given my first Grateful Dead cassette tape. My mother had given me it was the greatest hits. It was like Skeletons in the Closet. And I put it on because at the time I was kind of into heavy metal. Like, I don't even know why I say kind of. It was like Motley Crue was my favorite band. Yeah. If I had gloves on, there were no fingers.
And there might have been metal pieces somewhere.
Dude, yeah. And God, yeah. Dude, this is so embarrassing. Like I had so much Motley Crue memorabilia at one point safely secure in a Foot Locker in my bedroom that at some point my parents should have been like, this is a problem. Like, if anything happened to one of those 4 guys and they found that locker, I was going to court. Like, that's how embarrassing it was.
when the obsession gets a little too unhealthy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, at that point, my parents should have been like, this guy might have substance issues if he's not careful. Shoot. Oh, jam bands. I had to figure out where we were trying to land. So I got the album, I listened to it, and I barely got through. It might have been Saint Stephen, and I just, it didn't appeal to me. I thought it was going to be heavy because I saw skeletons.
Yeah.
There was a skeleton on the thing, and I was like, this makes sense.
Skeletons are dope.
Yeah. And then I would see people in it, and I was like, something's going on. But at the time, as a young kid, I identified with skateboarders and definitely some like 90s hipster mentality when it came to music, where I was like, oh, everyone's listening to this garbage now.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I'm over that. Like that mentality kept me from so many beautiful things in my life.
Yeah. Wanting to be different.
Yeah.
To like to the point where like you're actually conforming to the people that are trying not to be different.
Yeah. And this weird hierarchy need to be the one that discovered something.
Yeah.
And I
want to do it on my own.
Yeah.
I was always super like independent. Like I didn't want to ever be fucking, you could tell me the exact right thing that I would completely resonate and agree with.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah,
no.
dude. Yeah.
Until years later, I'd be like, let me give this a shot and be like, fuck, they were right.
God, I wish I was more like that. I always went about things my own way, but like as far as confrontation, I never really saw a big need for confrontation. And so people would battle up against me with things and I go, yeah, okay. Yeah. And I'd try to see their point, but then sometimes inside I'd just be like, hey, but you're full of shit.
Yeah.
But what's the point in bringing that up? You're an idiot. And then
I'm not gonna change your mind tonight.
Right.
That's my mentality now. I'm not at all a confrontational person. I'm not gonna change somebody's mind. If they're not open to having a conversation, like if they're already coming at me with like a very, stern opinion, I know they don't want to change their they're not having a conversation, they're trying to convince me of something. And if you're already doing that, I know I have no chance of convincing you of anything in this moment. So how do I get out of this conversation as quickly as I possibly can?
That energy of like someone, I get that in bars or after shows when people have had too much to drink. You can, as a person who's sober, who does not drink at all, like I can feel it. And when I feel that turn, I go, oh no, like I got to pawn this guy on somebody because he's going to get combative. It doesn't matter what I say. And I just don't want to be involved in it.
It's the energy. Like that's the energy that they're bringing, is that like they want, I think combative is probably the best word.
It's also, so as a person who has a little bit of like, I feel for a lot of people. On the back end, when I think about that, the worst part is that person is probably really hurting.
I know.
And
how do you empathetically deal with that?
Right.
And it's like, I think that used to bother me a lot more, because
like trying to empathize with other people,
trying to be like, well, like I know they're like a hurt person, and like I know they could be helped, and like I want to help the world, because deep down I was also a hurt person, and like I get it. But also again realizing like it's not our jobs to save people that don't want to be helped. Like I want to help people that want to be helped, and I think I'll do my best to always do that. But like if you don't want the help, like I can't convince you to get help.
Right. And that's the hardest part. I mean, you see it a lot when I was getting sober, because you'd have a lot of people in recovery or asking how I did certain things, and you can't help anybody that doesn't want it. You're 100% right on that. But it's hard to cut the cord.
Yeah.
Especially,
it feels mean.
Oh, dude, it's the worst. I've had to do it with close friends. I've had to do it with family members, and it's. I'm glad that a lot of them have figured it out, and we've been able to rekindle that relationship. But there's a couple of people that I know where I'm just like, their names get brought up in conversation, and I go, yeah, but I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I root for them internally, where I'm like, I hope they figure it out, and they get to that point where they look back and they go, man, like I was a real piece of work, huh?
Yeah.
You know.
And I think once you've started to do like your own, healing yourself, it's really easy for me to also look back at some of the relationships where like, oh shit, there are definitely people that have sort of cut me out too.
Oh yeah.
And me looking back and being like, that was a great move on their part.
Good call on you.
That was really smart.
Hard to swim when you got such a heavy weight holding on to you.
Like, damn, we should reconnect now, and I want to tell you, thank you for that.
Yeah, I've got a couple people like that in my life, and a few of them I haven't been able to get a hold of. And it hurts a little because I've had to do that to people, and then you self-reflect and go, I was that person. But jam bands came in probably in the later 90s, actually. Like I started touching base where, God, it might have been, kind of went into the dead. Marley came in. I started listening to a lot of Creedence. So classic rock started to make its way in. And then The Doors, which I can take or leave kind of.
Yeah.
I think Morrison, in a similar fashion of Charles Manson, is fascinating in a weird way. But, and then I started to kind of get into, Dave Matthews was kind of a jam band in the 90s. Blues Traveler, all of that kind of started to seep its way in, and we had the Beatles re-revolution in the 90s, like 1996. Okay. All that stuff started to come back. Then I want to say 1997, 98, 311 released an album that was real jammy, and I was like, okay. Started to kind of find that, and then
if you really want to feel old, that was when I was born.
97, 98?
97.
Well, thanks for giving me that. I know I'm probably going to just throw myself from the loft tonight, but I'm glad you have our final conversation. Transistor, I think, was the album. Here's a wild one for you. God. So South Park, right? If you watched South Park. So the first time South Park I'd ever seen it, I was on LSD. I did not know it was really happening. Like, I thought I had gone to a level where I was so high I had created a television show.
Dude, that's so funny.
And just watching that whole thing where he goes, me bad, me pa-chomp, pa-chomp, pa-chewy chomp. And I was going, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Does anyone else know what pa-chomp, pa-chomp, pa-chewy chomp means?
The first time I ever did mushrooms, I remember one of my friends put on, it was right when Big Mouth came out on Netflix.
Wow. Yeah.
And I remember sitting there watching it and being like, there's no fucking way anyone understands what is happening. Like, I remember like a condom hopping out of a trash can, and I'm like, what in the fuck is happening? Like, you're not following along in this, are you?
There's no way. This is now forcing me to let go of everything I know to be real.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Bob, did this. One of the most fascinating things I've ever seen on a trip, where there's an old show or a movie called James and the Giant Peach. You ever see this?
No. I mean, obviously, I've read the book.
Okay, so it's this weird animated thing where all these animals come to life and they're traveling around in this giant peach. So he invites us over for this dose party, and as we show up, there's like 6 of us, and we're in this basement, and he has put the hits inside of this little paper bag, and he comes around and he just opens it and tells everyone, take this and magical things will happen. And I'm hearing it and I'm going, what is this guy doing? And so then I do it. I'm going to play along and I'm like, all right, buddy, I've done this. At about the 45, 50-minute mark, when everyone's kind of turning on, he's like, let's watch a show. So now we're watching James and the Giant Peach, and there's a moment at the beginning where this weird guy's got a paper bag filled with glowing worms.
Oh,
and he
man.
goes, take this, James, and magical things will happen. And I look over to Bob, and he goes, huh? And I go, son of a bitch. And I mean, within 90 minutes, like the walls just looked orange, and I was like, fuck, we're in the Peach.
That's honestly brilliant.
Like,
That's
it was
awesome.
Such an amazing trip. I mean, it got wild when the movie got over because I was like, well, I don't know what we're doing now.
Well, now we're done. Yeah, it's always really like, you know, when you're tripping, you go into these zones where like you are fully invested. Like you are in this, and then it ends an hour, 2 hours later, and you're still tripping.
Like, I'm still
very hard, and you're like, well, now what?
Yeah,
like, well, what am I supposed? Like that became my life for that 2 hours.
Yeah. And the answer to that is jam bands.
Okay. There we go. Okay.
Because it's fascinating how that happens. Like at the 90-minute mark, when the movie's over and you're like, I am still going. Well, you're 3 hours into a set. That entire event is 5.5 hours.
Yeah.
And by the time that's done, if you made the mistake of not dropping until the second set, well, you should have known better.
Yeah, that's on you.
You know?
So your parents, like, were they not into jam? Like, I mean, you said your mom was the one that gave you.
My mom did. So my parents were like products of the 60s, basically. Yeah. They were hippies. They partied. They were open about that. I can remember hearing stories about weird stuff that didn't make sense.
Yeah. Your dad's been too fast for rain.
Oh, yeah, dude. I mean, yeah. God, on God, peyote, that story. Yeah. I mean, that's a wild one.
My dad is super into the Grateful Dead. He's been to 30 plus.
Was he born? So you were in California?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was born in New York, but he's
still a motherland.
Yeah.
For the Dead.
He was born in 61. And so,
that's right before it really started happening.
He was, and so in college, that's when he started getting into it. And
do you know what year he was in college?
It probably would have been right around 78.
Okay. That's when I was born. If that makes him feel any better.
If he's listening to this, which I'm sure he is not. That's at least when he went to college.
Unnecessary callbacks that are happening.
But see, he was super into the Dead, and he was, you know, he used to sometimes play like the Dead radio. He'd mostly listen to the fucking Finances and shit on the radio, so I tuned that out. But occasionally he'd put on music, and usually it would be the Dead, and I was never super into it.
Okay.
And the weird thing about this is my dad's never done a psychedelic in his fucking life.
Yeah.
And he never smoked weed. He drinks but never gets drunk. Like, he's pretty, again, like,
but he's
straight
into
edge,
the music.
but he loves the music.
Oh, dude.
And like, to me, like, I went to my first Dead and Company show in Chicago probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
And really the only reason I went was because I loved acid.
Right.
And I was like, it
is plentiful.
Yeah, so you know, this is what it seems like the people that love acid do, so let me try that. And then when I went to the first show and had a wonderful time, which I took a tab for.
So were you tripping during Drums in Space?
Yes. Oh yeah, I was. I had no idea what the fuck was going on.
That's the best part, when it's just going. I had a buddy who was on mushrooms at it in Boulder, and he just went, And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
and
go with it.
that was a really fun show. But also it ended up it rained like 30 minutes into the first set, and then it got delayed.
Yeah.
And then everyone kind of went in, but then once the rain finally stopped and everyone went out, so many people had either left or moved that I just walked right up to the front row.
Whoa,
And
rail
then,
ride.
Yeah, exactly. And then, well, yeah, I wasn't on the field, so like I was on the front row still, like in the stands, but yeah, and then spent the rest of the concert there. But I just remember afterwards, I talked to my dad, and I was like, "Why are you into this? Like, I don't get it."
So I go to those shows sober,
Mm-hmm.
and there is an energy that you tap into, and he may not even realize what it is, but like you get that many people.
It's a collective consciousness.
Yeah, and there is an immense level, a density of people that are on psychedelics, and that energy is just in the air.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's one of the most beautiful things in the world.
I went to my first Fish concert when they were here in Colorado.
At Dick's?
Yeah, at Dick's. The energy was a little bit different for sure.
Yeah.
It was
yeah,
it was a slightly more aggressive energy, I'd say.
Yeah, it's yeah, the first time I went and saw Fish, it was weird because I had this bro at Dick's, and he'd come up to me and he goes, got an extra? And I was like, no, man, I don't. And he goes, want to fight for yours? And I was like, what's happening?
Excuse me?
Where's the old hippie that's telling you that's not how we do this?
Yeah.
You know? Because when I had kind of come up, you would see like people do stuff like that, and there'd be an old head going, dude, that's not how we behave.
Yeah.
That's not, you know? And
Fish, it seemed like all bets were off.
yeah, it's a different vibe. And you start to realize that too when you go from jam band to jam band to jam band. It's not the same.
Yeah.
It's different.
I saw Pigeons playing ping pong. After
Those guys
that.
are fun.
That was a lot of fun. They were at Mission Ballroom.
Yeah.
That was a ton of fun.
Yeah, those guys are a lot of fun. The Kitchen Dwellers are a band that's really great if you enjoy bluegrass. Railroad Earth is one of the most. I mean, those guys jam so well. And Cheese. I mean, I love the String Cheese Incident, and I love their music, but I also love the fans of the String Cheese Incident. Out of every jam band fan in the world, I feel like the Cheeseheads are like the most eclectic and the most like open.
Yeah.
And I mean, you'll talk to other jam band fans and they go, yeah, they're like the weirdest. And you go, yeah, but they're not as crusty as some of these other ones. And they just seem the most welcoming. And I mean, there's people in capes. There's you'll see guys in dresses, and it's all glamorous and glitter.
Nice.
It's just they come to party.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun.
Jam band culture is such an interesting culture to me.
Yeah.
It really is. And the fact that each jam band does have a pretty distinctly different type of like same but very different at the same time. Like they're all really unique.
A lot of them will at the same point they somehow go back to covering a Dead song. I feel like
that's what got all of them into it is the thing. Like that's why like, you know, that the Grateful Dead will always be so like famous for what they did is like that was the original.
Yeah.
And everything broke off from there.
Right. And I think as a band also, like, you know, they started doing Kesey's acid tests. And when they talk about whether they had to play or not had to play, it was an experience. That's what a lot of people that have not been inside the jam band culture, they don't understand is that band is never going to die.
No.
Because what they were selling was a culture. And it's a circus.
Yeah, and that's what made me get into it was because I had then read about the history of it and was like, the history of it is just so goddamn cool. Like this thing that I now love all started because of these guys.
Yeah.
So like me going to that first Dead and Company show was like, I need to pay homage to these guys.
Oh yeah, dude. It's God, it's so fascinating. It really is. And those guys, the other thing that I really respected, I saw Further several times at Red Rocks, and one year we saw all 4 shows. The Thursday was a nice come up. The Friday and Saturday got real weird. Like there were points where they were playing where they just weren't connecting.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is sloppy. And then Sunday was the most beautiful thing in the world. And what I realized was what I started to respect was their openness and vulnerability to fail and go, we're still doing it. And we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And the magic. When I want to say it was Uncle John's band one time. They were playing and they went off on this jam, and the jam lasted what seemed like forever, to the point that people started losing interest.
Yeah.
Like, and then there was all these little conversations started happening at Red Rocks, and I'll never forget sitting there. I could hear the jam, but then the like chatter became part of the music. And then I lost it. I was like, what in the fuck is like I couldn't, there was a sensory overload.
Yeah.
And right around that time, it was like you felt everyone go, what are we doing? And then they snapped right back into Uncle John's band, and everyone, 9,000 people went, oh yeah, that's where we're at. And it was such magic.
Like the collective energy shift all to the exact same thing at the exact same time. Yeah.
It was so cool.
That's awesome. Do you still dabble with psychedelics?
So, yeah, to some extent.
Yeah.
I've not been terribly open about it. Psilocybin for sure. I enjoy the process of growing those. I think it's an interesting form to watch. I have not done LSD for. God, dude, it's been forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think 2000, maybe 2001.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's been a long time.
That's 20 years.
Oh, God. Yeah, the realization of the age. But at some point, I mean, I might be open to doing it again. I went through intramuscular ketamine for anxiety and depression. And I'm going to be honest, for me, I again, just have to state that for me, it was a life-changing experience.
When was that?
So it's been a couple of years, I guess now, when I started it. It was right around the time we started the pod. So I guess a year and a half ago.
Okay.
I went through 7. They were all fascinating. And I started it was like.
Had you ever experimented with like snorting ketamine before that?
Nope. I'd never done ketamine recreationally. Okay. So the first time I did it was IM. And I've never done DMT. And so I've never been in an experience with a psychedelic where it went from here to there you go. 0 to
oh fuck.
Yeah.
In 2 seconds.
And the nurse told me, I was like, how long do I have for the onset? She goes, about 4 minutes. And I was like, okay, yeah, all right. And then at like 2 minutes, I was going, oh, my body's buzzing.
Yeah.
And I had to get my headphones on. And then I'm also very vocal when I do it. So I recorded a lot of the audio and it's weird. I mean, it's the first one I went to this weird land of light. And I don't know, it was funny, Marciana was in there with me and she goes, I think you became like an Asian man. And I was like, no, I very distinctly remember being an Asian woman. And I was like going around the city greeting people and they were all going like, hey, and I kept saying thank you and this and that. And whatever it was at that time, it was like, I was somewhat important, like a Dalai Lama, some sort of. It was fascinating, and I was so filled with gratitude, and my fear of whatever that chemical was going to do to me, and whether it would throw me back into like a relapse and all this stuff, it all just was eviscerated. Like none of that mattered. And then I would go in every week and do it again. And then I didn't do it for like a year and a half, and I got really cocky. And it just, because I started doing the troches. Do you know about troches?
No.
Troches they're an oral ketamine. It's like a lozenge, and you'll swish it around and then spit it out when it starts coming on. You can swallow it, but it causes a lag time hangover. So I was doing that with my therapist, and it wasn't breaking me through that wall.
Yeah.
I was getting somewhat drunk, and I hated that feeling. I'm like, I don't want to feel like I'm boozed up. It was softening me to where I was open to talk about things, but I couldn't get out of my own way.
Yeah. Like still very much in your head. Like not processing, just talking in circles.
Yep. And it's funny because Cam, right now, I'm only realizing this right now. But you know, I got so shaken the last time I did ketamine. And the audio is traumatic to listen to. They gave me too much. It had been way too long since I had done it. And so at the level that I was at, it was like 130 was my dosage. But 120 was probably ideal for me. And I have a friend who was doing like 240, and I was like, that seems like a lot. But so I was like, I also had explained, I was like, I've been doing these trochees. They ain't doing shit. So I never put this together in my life history, but it's a lot like when I took that acid and I was like, this isn't doing anything.
Yeah.
And anytime your ego gets involved and you think that you're above this,
talk shit, get hit.
Dude, I've never been rattled so hard.
Yeah.
It came on and I was like, okay, I'm used to this. And then I was like, this is what I want. And then have you done ketamine?
No, okay. I haven't.
So there's for me and how my body processes it is there's this information download. And so it just starts going and I go, okay, all right. And then it's textures. I mean, I am deep in a weird space.
Yeah.
I mean, it is by all means what people call a K-hole. And then what happened is, and in the audio, you can hear me going, yeah, okay, all right, okay, hold on. And then as soon as that vulnerability of wanting it to stop, you can't fight it.
No.
And something happened. It's just the information went too quick, and I was trying to shake it off. And then I saw a computer that was downloading information, like processing it, and the matrix code that was running through the screen was moving so fast that like smoke started coming out of the back of the computer. And I went, all right. And I saw that, and man, it was a split second. I saw that and I went, that's our nervous system. And then I went, oh fuck. And dude, I mean, when I tell you ketamine goes, got you, and shook me. I started screaming, crying. I was telling my wife sorry. I was yelling that I shouldn't have done this. Also, no idea that I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then when I came back
it's just happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
I am now in the K-hole fighting.
Yeah.
But I'm fighting outside of it. And as I'm starting to kind of land, I can hear my wife going, it's all right. It's okay. And I was like, huh? What's happening? And the nurse is going, you're going to be all right. And I learned before, if a nurse is in there, something went wrong. Because
I shouldn't be there. They should not be there.
One other time I stood up and they came in immediately. They're like, hey, we can't have you on your feet.
Yeah.
And I was like, was I? And I kept repeating, was I bad? Did I do something bad? Oh no. And she was like, no, it's fine. And she was like, it wasn't that bad. Like there wasn't anybody else in here. Most of the clients were fine. And I was like, whoa, why are you saying that? Like that sounds like there was a scene. I listened to the audio, and when I did, I was like, oh God, I hope I didn't mess anybody else's trip up. Yeah. Because it's hard to listen to. Yeah. Because there's no, I mean, if I was that good of an actor, dude, I'd have an Emmy. Like I was in hell and I know it.
And you nailed it.
Yeah. And when I talked about it on the podcast, and Zach was like, so you don't want to, you're done doing that, right? You don't want to do that again? And I was like, no. I have to do that again.
You have to now get over the whatever trauma, whatever was done on that time, and is still something you now know that you need to get over.
Whatever it was. And I also do understand that it was too much for that type of delay. I I did with ketamine what I did with pot.
Yeah. I think I have the tendency to do the same things. When I went to Peru to do ayahuasca about 1.5 years ago.
Okay.
And it was 3 ceremonies over the course of the week. And so, you know, I wanted to just like figure out what the fuck was going on.
Right.
Yes,
was it good? Did you enjoy it?
It was absolutely the most life-changing thing that I've done.
Okay.
So like I got what I came there for. But the first ceremony it was amazing. I was laughing. I was like, felt like I was encompassed by all of this love.
Yeah.
I was like thinking of you know, this thing that had happened recently that I wasn't too fond of, and just being like, nah, I can still love anyways. Like, I don't have to let this get me down and all this. And it's
like a lightning experience.
Yeah,
right?
it was. I was literally laughing. Like, I laugh when I take acid. That's the hardest I have ever laughed in my life.
There's a shaman going,
and then
I don't know.
Yeah, and I am there were 8 of us that were on the retreat. I was the only one laughing.
Oh no.
And I felt so bad because I'm hearing these people like puking around me.
Did you purge it all?
Not that one.
Okay.
Not that ceremony. So that ceremony I was fucking on cloud 9.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I just don't have any trauma. I gotta
that might be my favorite quote. Maybe I don't have any trauma. Like, it's like Jerry Seinfeld's in your head. What's the deal with trauma? You're like, I don't have any. But then ayahuasca's like, oh, I got it.
Yeah, and then
we gotta unlock this door.
As you can imagine, the second ceremony did not go that well.
The shaman just going, why aren't you laughing?
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into everything that happened there, but it was. I mean, that ended up being the most profound ceremony.
Yeah.
But one of the facilitators, when we were sharing the morning afterwards, after I said something about, you know, after the first one I thought I was good, he kind of just smirked and he's like, yeah, man, I knew you were about to get your shit rocked.
Yeah. Yeah. Ayahuasca, no offense, ayahuasca doesn't really like it when you laugh at it. What was the duration of that, like the onset?
It's really similar to mushrooms.
Is it?
Yeah.
So it's like a 45 to an hour kind of
pretty
climate?
much. Yeah. Like,
and is it only 5 to 6 hours?
Yeah, 5 to 6 hours. Where I then really fucked up again was
I like how you're like, I don't think I have any trauma. I definitely have trauma. Yeah, I could still go.
I wasn't done learning the lesson. So then after I went through that whole traumatic experience, and you know, of the second one, you know, the third one, I was like, well, fuck. Now I got all this trauma I guess I didn't know about. What's next? I want to go deep and figure out like what you know, I flew all this way, like what else can I figure out? And so after I, you know, took the ayahuasca the third time now, I just started laughing again and feeling all of this love, and I was fucking pissed about it because because I'm like, no, I'm trying to get to the deep root of my fucking traumas here, man.
I love, there's a beautiful trickery about it. It's literally ayahuasca going, oh, you want to go deep? You're going to laugh.
Yeah.
You go, oh, I don't have any trauma. Oh, look at this. You go, okay, I'm ready. Oh, you're going to laugh again.
Yeah, and then so that was the last ceremony, and I was laughing and having a good time.
Yeah.
And kind of mad about it, and I was like, give me a second dose. Give me more.
Oh, really?
I want more. So then he gave me a second dose. And
do you have the option to take the second one?
Yeah, okay. Usually they'll give you that option. I mean, like they won't always do that to everybody. Like if they're like, I think you're good, like they're gonna cut you off.
Yeah.
But they're like, yeah, you know, you seem like you still have your wits about you, and they're like, it's your last ceremony. Fuck it, what the hell?
Yeah.
And then after I got the second dose, it was like it was basically just an exact repeat of the second night, and essentially just being like, dude, like just take what you learned and just be fine with that. Yeah. Like,
why do you want to have a bad time?
Yeah, like come on. But yeah, the first time I ever interacted with cannabis, it was with an edible, the classic story of,
dude.
Yeah, I'm not really feeling this. Give me another one.
Yeah.
And then I remember basically like fucking crying on the side of the road while like asking my friends to go get me in and out. At the same time,
I'd like to add fast food to this, please.
Yeah. I'm like, well, you know, people tell me that things taste good when you're high, so I might as well try that.
Yeah, I've cannabis has waylaid me. 2014, 2013, something like that. I had an edible out here, and we weren't living out here, and it was, the guy. We just went to the dispensary to exercise our rights. That's neither of us were like high users. And I was like, well, how about
this
an
is cool
edible? I don't want
to. Let me walk right in and see what I can do.
And I was like, I quit smoking cigarettes in 2011, so I just don't want to smoke. Yeah. And he's like, oh, these edibles are great. And I was like, cool. I was like, how many should I eat? And he's like, I mean, you could eat the whole thing. And I was like, really? Like all of it? And he goes, I mean, it's not going to kill you, but. And I was like, well, I don't really do this. I was like, okay. And I was like, well, just give me the hybrid. Because that sounds less scary.
Sounds like I'm not having to commit to anything.
Right. I'm halfway in.
Yeah.
And so yeah, what I decided to do is I was like, I'll pop this whole thing. It's like just a 10 mil. Oh, man. And then I'm gonna go to bed.
Yeah.
And so I popped it, and we got into bed. We were staying at Mercy's cousin's house, and I was reading this book. God, it's probably in here somewhere. And I realized that I couldn't really make sense of it. And that's when I was like, I think I'm high. Like, I'm high to the point that I should go to bed. And then I started to get paranoid. So I was like, I'm going to pretend to read so that she doesn't know. And as she comes in, she just goes, how you doing? I was like, I'm fine. I'm good. No problems, really. Pretty much. She goes, yeah. She goes, how's the book? And I was like, it's great. I'm almost halfway done. She goes, yeah. It's upside down. And I was like, oh no. And she goes, how you doing? I was like, I'm too high. I'm too high right now.
Yeah.
And then we tried to go to bed, and then I just started freaking out. I was like, you can't go to bed right now. She's like, why? And I was like, well, there's a snake over there. And she goes, a snake where? And I was like, I'm just confused that I'm going to die. And she goes, okay. I was like, I want to take a shower. Like, for some reason in my head, I was like, if I shower, I'm going to feel better. And I was like, I was like, how well do you know your cousin? And she goes, not very well. And I was like, I don't want to die in a stranger's bed. Just lost it. Man, the next day she was mad. She goes, you held me up until like 4 in the morning. Yeah. Just with the inability to be able to just deal with it.
Yeah, just figure it out. Yeah. Maybe not the last time I took 10 milligrams, but I took 10 milligrams once before going to the airport.
It's always like, this is going to be an adventure.
Yeah, it certainly was an adventure. And I'm not a lot of experience with edibles at that point.
Yeah,
really at all. And I'd finally sort of just gotten okay with smoking weed.
Yeah,
and I was like, all right, well, I want to be a little bit high on the plane and when I'm there and having a good time. And
this way I'm not going to smell like it.
Yeah, exactly. So let me pop this. And I was in Chicago at the time, and I was like, how do I time this? So like, by the time I wanted to time it so I would get through TSA.
Yeah,
and
that's smart.
And then it would start hitting me.
Yeah.
I took it on the train to the airport.
Well, that's like an hour delay.
Yeah. Thinking that it was going to take a really long time to hit me.
Oh,
no. And I obviously got really high.
Yeah.
While going through TSA, and I got so high that I got through TSA and just forgot to grab my bag. And then bag. I got there early too. I just left my bag when I got through I walked through, didn't pick it up, and then my gate was like right over there. So I went and sat there for an hour without my bag.
Oh, God.
And then I have my pre-flight routine is then 30 minutes right before it starts boarding, I go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And then I'm good to go. And so I went to the bathroom. I came back. And then that's when I noticed.
I'm missing everything.
No. That's when I noticed that the gate had changed like 30 minutes ago.
Oh, so, that's the worst.
And then that was the moment where I was like, well, let me grab my bag and go to the new gate. And
let me grab the bag I've not had for over 3 hours.
And that was the moment that I was like, my bag's not here.
Someone stole my bag.
And then I had realized, oh fuck, I left that at the checkpoint. And that's when like the new gate was in a completely new terminal in fucking O'Hare. So it was.
Oh, you're not even in Denver.
I'm in the wrong place completely.
Oh, dude, in Chicago is such a massive airport.
So my flight is boarding now. I am in the wrong terminal completely. I realize I don't have my bag, and I'm like, oh, still really high.
Yeah.
Like, oh fuck. And so I run to like the nearest security gate, just in a panic.
Yeah.
And just see the first TSA agent, and I was like, did anyone leave a bag here? And then I think I said it that clearly, but I might not have, because he was a little confused. And he's like, what? I'm like, I left the gate, and I left my bag here. I forgot to pick it up. And then his first question to me was this the checkpoint you came through? And I was like,
and you're like, I don't know,
dude. I have no idea.
You almost want to default to going, dude, I am so high right now.
Yeah. And so at that point, he's like, no, like there's not a bag here. And so then I made the decision. I'm like, well, fuck it. I'm not missing the flight. And so I ran through the airport to get on the flight, and just got on the flight without my bag.
Wow. Did they eventually like track you?
Yeah. They did. I sent my like once I got there, my friend I was visiting back home in LA, I was like, so funny story. I left my bag, and he actually like literally called like a TSA number or something and was like, hey, do you guys have a lost bag? And they were able to locate it.
That's great.
Before I even ended up landing. So I got it once I came back, but like, yeah, that was the last time that I took that many edibles before going to the airport.
I feel like, I don't know, if you were to do it, I guess I've just realized throughout my entire life, if I plan something, expect the unexpected. It's going to get weird. Because in my brain, I was like, oh, just take it as soon as you get to the airport. And then I go, oh, but then you're going to be in line because there's a massive delay you weren't expecting. Like, it's never easy.
No, it's not. That's one of those stories that if I ever did decide I wanted to do some stand-up comedy, I think that's a good story.
That's the one. Yeah. I got some great TSA material.
Yeah.
Because I get patted down pretty regularly. That's something just because I
give off that.
I give off that vibe, and I'm just different. And so then when they ask questions, if they catch me off guard, it's always like, huh? Okay, well, and then they go, all right, okay.
I know this guy's
Captain
anxious.
Grunts,
yeah.
Step over here. This one was weird. I had a lady one time, and I was so confused. Like, I was starting to get mad because she goes, I kept going through, and she goes, well, you keep going off. And I go, well, I think it's the machine. And she goes, no, yeah, the machine's going off. And I was like, that's what I just said. And she goes, well, but you're going off. And I was like, the machine's going off when I go through it. And she goes, yes. And I was like, okay. I was like, but what I'm saying, I think the machine is broken. Like something, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah. And
she goes, go through again. And then she goes through, and she goes, and I was like, I'm telling you, put me through another machine. She goes, we don't have time for that. She goes, do you have a fake leg? And I was like, no, I don't have a fake. And she goes, are you sure? And then I was like, how dumb would I have to be like, oh, wait, yeah, I do have a fake leg.
Hold up.
I'm sorry. A traumatic experience where I lost a limb, I just now realized. How high do you think I am right now? Are you sure? And I was so baffled. I was like, yeah, I'm sure I have a real leg over here.
Wow. That's when it becomes like a battle of the egos too, and it just gets worse.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I've realized if you just are dumb and childish with them and non-combative, you can get through it. But it's always just like, you're the alpha at this point.
Honestly, once I realized that TSA is not trying to catch you for drugs,
no,
they're trying to catch you for weapons.
Yeah,
that's when I realized I'll always be fine.
Yeah.
I never have a weapon. I might have drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't have a weapon.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the funny thing is that really at the end of the day, that's all they care about.
Yeah.
They just want you to not, they just want everyone to be safe
Yeah.
from point A to point
Yeah,
B.
that's it. And like just understanding like that's their objective. I'm gonna just be fine with that. But
yeah.
AJ, man, this has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, Cam, thank you for coming over.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me at ajfinney.com, at AJ _ at Instagram. Yeah. And then probably, hopefully, comedy clubs all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you do travel around quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm trying, doing everything I can.
Well, thank you for fucking inviting me into your home here.
Dude. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for bringing your energy.
Much love, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. We're done. Thank you, everybody, for coming along on this journey, for listening, for supporting me. I hope you're following your dreams out there. I hope you're doing everything that makes you happy. I hope you're feeling every single emotion that comes along the way. That's all I got for you. Till next time. Peace.